My name is Khoti Kamanga. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Public Law, University of Dar es Salaam. I hold a master's degree in international law, another master's in European Union law, and a PhD from the University of Patrice Lumumba, Moscow, Russia. That's my professional background. But at the university specifically, I teach, I do research, and I've published extensively in the area of migration studies. I am also a co-founder of the Center for the Study of Forced Migration and its coordinator from 1998 to 2012. And at some point also in my lifetime, I was the elected secretary of the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration. We must begin by recalling the fundamental objectives of any higher learning institution. And there are three, basically, which is teaching, to do research, provide consultancy services, and also public awareness. So universities, in another word, are the machine or the forum where knowledge is created. And for that matter, research-based knowledge is created, and that knowledge is now shared. And in that process of sharing that knowledge, there is a potential of impacting on policies, on laws, but also enhancing compliance with the law. If an opportunity is created for that information to be used by policymakers, certainly there is a big possibility that there will be reconsideration, reviews, and amendments of laws, but also a change in policies. Our own policy, for example, of 2013, I think it's high time it was reviewed. I must begin by drawing attention to the circumstances under which CSFM, the Center for the Study of Forced Migration, was created in 1995. You will notice that 1995 is only a year after the tragic events in neighboring Rwanda, the genocide in particular. And that as a result of the genocide in an ongoing armed conflict, there was a huge exodus of Rwandese to neighboring countries in the Great Lakes, including Tanzania. Now, the result of that specifically was that Tanzania overnight became overwhelmed with that exodus of approximately 1 million refugees. Now, it also emerged that now policymakers were turning around, looking at a dedicated institution which would offer them advice on what policies to take, what humanitarian interventions to be undertaken. And there was no such institution in existence in 1995. So that is what prompted government and the University of Dar es Salaam to begin thinking of creating an institution dedicated to issues of forced displacement. And that is how the Center for the Study of Forced Migration came into being. Right. Now, more specifically, the center was to be a place for doing research, right, offering consultancy, but also facilitating the teaching of refugee-related issues across faculties at the faculty. But the very first important event that CSFM undertook in 1995 was to organize an international conference in Arusha, and it was the first of its type while the genocide was going on. So there was an international conference which invited players from across the world. They met in Arusha to reflect what was taking place and therefore what should be the way forward. Now, beyond the general conference, subsequent 1995, CSFM was invited by government in 2001 to do a study whose contents would assist government in drawing up the national refugee policy. So the study was in 2001, and subsequently came the national refugee policy. But there are other stakeholders also, who have non-governmental actors, who have approached CSFM, including humanitarian agencies, diplomatic missions here in Tanzania. They also, in 2003, approached the Center for the Study of Forced Migration to help them understand what really is going on in terms of the genuine impact of the presence of refugees in northwestern Tanzania. Because, as I said, as a consequence of the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, northwest Tanzania was the primary host of those refugees. So over time, it became very, very clear that the presence of those refugees has left an impact on the host nation and community. But what remained undone was to assess more objectively and as comprehensively as possible what is the nature of that impact. And that is what led to the 2003 study by the Center on the impact of the presence of refugees in northwestern Tanzania. Another event that is worth noting is what was known then as the East African Refugee and Humanitarian Affairs cause, ISRA. Now, this was a cause that was designed from inspiration from the summer school offered by the University of Oxford. The Refugee Studies Center at Oxford has a program, Refugee Studies, which brings together participants from across the globe in summer and introduces them to the essentials of migration studies. So we drew inspiration from that summer school and designed the East African, a similar course, but whose focus was the Great Lakes region. So rather than attempting to familiarize government employees, humanitarian actors in our region here with the global framework, or all the global issues, which is sort of futile, we opted to focus only on the Great Lakes region. Now, in the 10 years of its existence, ISRA brought together, trained close to 3,000 participants from across the region, here in East Africa, but also Southern Africa. So its impact, as you can see, the numbers involved and the scope, the geographical scope of the participants was quite huge. Yeah, so in the 10 years that ISRA ran, yeah, that was its impact. Yeah, much of it, as I said, has to do with training. Government officials, humanitarian actors, both international and local, but also the study reports that I've mentioned. But also the center and those affiliated to it have in regular intervals shared their experience with the general public, especially through the media, print as well as electronic. Training, the consultancy, the outreach programs that have been undertaken by the center. What I should also point out, answering your specific question about the indelible mark the center might have left, is that it brought a lot of visibility. It brought high visibility of refugee matters to the general public. It also brought visibility to the global community about the situation of refugees in Tanzania. And therefore, it is not accidental that the coordinator of the Center for the Study of Forced Migration, right, was elected on two separate occasions. Elected, not appointed, was elected to serve as secretary of the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration. So it's very, very clear. It's very, very clear that both the center, both the university, as well as the country, the nation in large, enjoyed some kind of visibility globally. For you to be elevated, to be elected to that position, it means you bring with you some knowledge, some experience that is widely appreciated. So the first election, the first instance was at a conference, a biennial conference in York University, Canada, right? 2000 and was it 2005? Yes, 2005, I think. And after the 2-year tenure came to an end, the subsequent conference in Sao Paulo, Brazil, also re-elected that very Tanzanian who was coordinator for the Center for the Study of Forced Migration to serve another 2-year term. So no doubt about it that the activities, the presence of the center has left a footprint in global migration studies. We've collaborated with government in the very beginning, for example, in establishing the center itself, right? It was through collaboration between the university and government, the Ministry of Home Affairs. So there is no doubt whatsoever that collaboration with government was quite intense and continues to be up to now, right? The study, for example, on the review of law and policies, refugee-related laws and policies of 2001. That was an assignment given to the center by the government, right? On various occasions, we have worked closely with government. We have worked with government and continue to work with government on the National Consultative Forum, as you are aware, right? And continue to consult regularly with government. I think the two biggest challenges that the center faces, one is the issue of funding. The center is starved of funding. There is no dedicated funding on the part of the host institution, which is the university, but even humanitarian actors, especially foreign humanitarian actors, have been not too generous. They've not been too generous. So that's the biggest challenge to run a center, to run an institution which is engaged in the objectives that the center wishes to pursue. Funding is essential, and funding is in short supply. That is one. But secondly, unfortunately, is also the dissipation of expertise. Those experts at the center over time have been removed from those areas to other assignments, to other areas. So you have a human resources deficit, right? So that is very, very crippling. On the one hand, you are starved of funding, but on the other hand, there's also dissipation of human resources. So the two have combined to devastate, literally, if I can use that word, to devastate the center, and it explains its current position. By avoiding saving them from the challenges I've just mentioned, the issue of funding and the issue of human resources. Those experts should be allowed to remain where they belong and where they're the most useful. Some of them have been removed to places where now they have lost totally touch, right? Their total engagement with matters of migration studies. I think when you go up in the sky and take a bird's view of the situation in Tanzania, two things are clear. One is that the evolution of refugee protection regime appears to have gone through two stages, two phases, if you want. The first one is what Professor Rutinwa once called the golden age of refugee protection in Tanzania. So you're talking about the 50s right up to the early 90s. And at the heart of that phase, of course, was the open door policy, right? The liberal generosity towards refugees. Following rather the tragic event in Rwanda and the mass exodus into Tanzania, you began seeing shifts in policy, away from the open door policy to a regime broadly called a restrictionism in matters of access to education, matters of residence, matters of access to the labor market, right? So from a golden age, right, to a restrictionist age. And I have to add, while you are still on this question, what has been the impact of the open door policy? One of the benefits, one of the fruits was to tap into the skills, to tap into the knowledge that these refugees hosted in Tanzania brought with them. Several. In the first place, from the point of view of academia. From the point of view of academia, there's ample evidence to show that those refugees who are arriving, who are well trained, with specializations in sometimes very, very unique areas, their access to the labor market, especially the institutions of higher learning, is of quite some benefit. The University of Dar es Salaam benefited extensively from engaging refugees who were professors, political science. There was the Zimbabwean Nathan Shamuyarira. In the same department, there was Professor Michongwe, another professor. In education, you had Rwandese, Professor Rubaguma. There was Kwauli Msisia, another Malawian. The Department of Botany benefited extensively from the services of Dr. Paul Munyenyembe. So once you open up space, you stand to benefit. I will be immodest enough and also recall my own experience. When I arrived in 1991 for my studies in Russia, I already had finished my studies. I had a master's as well as a PhD. So to put it in simple terms, the University of Dar es Salaam was reaping what it did not sow, because I was trained exclusively from funding from other countries. But I arrived already equipped to take up a job as a lecturer. And it is also not accidental that I was part of the team at the center that was given the task to relaunch the teaching of refugee-related causes. Why? Because prior to my arrival at the University of Dar es Salaam, I already had studied international refugee law. Right? I already had studied international refugee law. So in other words, opening up space in higher learning institutions is one thing, but we should also take advantage of the presence of skilled labor within the refugee community. Those of us who have been to these refugee camps see the distinct nature. For example, the churches, the housing, and the churches and residences that and farming, 3 areas, right, where the work done by the hands of these Burundi refugees stands out as something to be emulated, right? But it has to begin by changing the mindset, a policy mindset change, which would begin to consider these refugees, whether they're academicians or not, but seeing them as the people with a potential to contribute to the national agenda, national development. And therefore, once you do that, you make it easier to allow them to participate in all national forum that has to do with issues of refugee protection. But it has to begin with an appreciation of the potential these people bring with them. Depending who you are, in my case, I've never shied away from sharing my life experience, not to talk besides the professional experience, whenever I'm in classrooms, whenever I'm invited to academic forums, whenever I'm invited by the media, as is presently the case, right, to open up and share my observations, my experience through the print and electronic media. So I think I've used well the chances before me to share that experience, and I hope it has contributed to a considerable extent in correcting misinformed public perceptions about who refugees are, what do they bring with them, and what potential they hold. Yes, I've mentioned already Shamuyarira, I've mentioned Michongwe, I've mentioned Rubagumya, I've mentioned Msisia, I have mentioned Munyenyembe, right? I should also add one name. I don't how I escaped this name. Is Judge Tujilane Rose Chizumila. She was a refugee here in Tanzania after her father fell out with the regime in Malawi. So she moved overnight from being the daughter of an envoy in New York, in Washington, overnight. When the father politically fell out with the regime, they had to travel back. They had to abandon their posh home in New York to return to Africa, initially to Zambia and subsequent to Dar es Salaam, as a refugee, right? And it explains her book, whose title is from a girl refugee to a judge. Right? So despite that background, as a refugee, she was able to complete her studies here. As a refugee, she also completed a legal degree here. And after that, right, it entitled her to be employed as a legal officer with the Tanzania Legal Corporation. So yeah, so in many ways, she was assisted by the Tanzania government. She was granted asylum, but she also, in return, right, played her role as a legal officer. We need to re-examine the open door policy. Open door policy. I am not in any manner advocating a cut and paste of the open door policy as it was then, and to paste it into present day Tanzania. That would be unrealistic, and maybe it might even backfire. But that is one. We need to take a look to reconsider our assessment of the open door policy. The second thing that, and related to that, which is important, is that the framework here in Tanzania centers around two things, right? There is the statute, there's the Refugees Act of 1998, and then there is the National Refugee Policy of 2013, I believe, right? Now, if you examine these two, you will discover that we began with a statute, right? Which is a strange way, it's an unconventional way, because usually you begin with a policy, because a policy allows the widest possible participation of actors, and therefore you are able to gain much deeper insights, be more comprehensive, and you use that document now to inform the law, what the law should be like. So we went into reverse order. We began with a statute in 1998, and then 5 years later with the policy. Another and related bigger problem, of course, is the absence of regulations to the statute. The statute is a good, useful tool, but in the field, oftentimes, those in the field are guided by regulations, and not the statute, nor the policy as a first resort tool, right? Out there in the field, immigration officers, right, and the like, are always guided by regulations to the laws. So that's the gap, and I think if those things are done, if the statute is reviewed, if the policy is also reviewed, if the regulations are enacted, we will have made an important step in putting our house to order. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because we are part of a bigger community. For example, we are part of the East African community. And the East African community requires member states to harmonize their policies and laws with regard to refugees and refugee protection. So I do not see how we can be able to get into that harmonization process at the regional level. The framework is not in its best form. Yeah, we must remember that we are living in what is called the information age era, right? Where things are run, decisions have to be taken on the basis of research-based information. Now, research-based information comes from where, right? Largely, it will come from these higher learning institutions. Largely, it will come from them, because this is their preoccupation. They've been trained to do this. They've been trained to do research. They've been trained to write all manner of documents, right? So it is from these higher learning institutions that the information that is necessary to run the country generally, but also to frame, to couch, to create the appropriate laws and appropriate policies will come from. So I foresee that the role of higher learning institution, rather than diminishing, I think they will keep on acquiring heightened importance. They'll become very, very important.